Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to the solder sesh where we will actually be soldering today. Yay! We have a couple different camera views here. This one is this one is it's tearing a little bit. The video isn't super stable, so sorry about that. We were trying to work on that, but I think we'll have to work on that a little bit later. It should be pretty good. And we, of course, have the actual microscope cam up there. So we're giving you two different zoomed in views today. So it'll be exciting. But before that, I wanted to talk about supplies. So we're starting to sell some soldering iron kits. And the idea there is that, like a lot of people sell soldering irons and kits, but there really wasn't anything that was geared towards introductory surface mount soldering on a budget. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to provide a way of getting your feet wet with tools and accessories that were like pretty decent, that would get you through the learning curve without too much frustration, but also wouldn't break the bank. We use the Hako iron, the FX888D, the little blue and yellow one, pretty often, and that's a really nice iron, but it alone is like $100, so it's kind of spendy. We are like putting together one with a Yahua brand iron, YIHUA, and it just plugs straight into the wall. It doesn't have a separate power supply. And that plus all of the supplies that include flux and, small diameter solder wick, tweezers, basically everything that you kind of need to do some successful surface mount soldering. All of that, plus the iron, we're trying to get to a price point of about $75. So, it's still not super cheap, but it is more intermediate level tools. And we feel that kit and those tools will definitely, you'll definitely be able to use them pretty well and determine whether or not you even like surface mount soldering. And then at that point, if it seems like something you might be doing more of, then it makes sense to spend more money on maybe like a nicer iron with more, temperature controls and things like that. So anyway, what we're doing now is we're evaluating some different parts that we want to put in the kit, some different supplies, flux and solder and solder wick. And we just got a few different things in, as well as we have some of our like old favorites here. And we're going to be putting together a Foxy Pride right here that you see as we evaluate them. All right, so zoom center that up again. All right. So what do we have here? There are different types of fluxes, and I am not a fan of no clean flux. It's okay for some things, but like for through-hole soldering, it's typically fine if you're working with solder that has a relatively big core that has a lot of flux inside the core. It's relatively okay, but it's not very active. It's not very aggressive, and it tends to dissipate super quickly. So you get like maybe one shot of soldering at it where it makes your joint all nice, and then like that's it. And so because of that short working life, and because it's such a mild flux, I feel like it takes more skill in order to use it successfully. So it's not really great to learn on. My favorite flux for surface mount soldering is water soluble, because it is the most aggressive, and that's what we have some Chip Quick water solubles over here. It's the most aggressive, and it stays around the longest. It gives you longer working time, and it's super easy to clean off because you just wash it. But on the other hand, you do have to wash it because if you let it stay on, past like a day or so, then it's such an active, aggressive flux that it can actually start corroding your solder joints. So you do have to wash it, and you also have to make sure that if you have delicate things on your boards, like any electronics with holes in them, like pressure sensors or speakers or something like that, you have to mask them off before you wash it. And so because of that kind of stuff, I also don't necessarily love providing that for an introductory level kit, which leaves us with the middle solder, or the middle flux, nice medium of the road flux. It's called rosin RMA, rosin mildly activated, and it's a really great compromise. You know, it won't corrode unless it's left on for years and years and years in humid environments. So, you know, it does leave a little bit of like a sticky, yellowy residue. So some people prefer to wash it off, and that's fine. And, you know, if you were making these things for production, for things that were leaving your desk going out into the world, then yes, you definitely want to clean it off. It does clean off with isopropyl alcohol very well, 90% and above. And, but it's fine if you don't clean it off. And it has a pretty good working life. It holds up to some repeated soldering. And I think that kind of solder is a great one, great general purpose solder that we would like to, or flux that we would like to include in a kit. So we have some different ones here. Like kind of the tried true favorite is Kester 186. It has like a yellowy color. It smells piney. This is another so-called Kester 186. It did come in Kester packaging, but you know, one of these things does not look like the other. So I'm not 100% certain that it is legit Kester brand. You know, the font's a little, like, things are just a little different about it. And I don't think I've used this yet. Yeah, I mean, it does have like a yellowy color. It smells a little less piney, but similar. So, you know, it might just be different packaging for a different market. I don't know. Then we have the Circuit Works rosin flux dispensing pen. This was just another one that we had lying around. It's a Chemtronics. Chemtronics makes some nice stuff. It's CW8200. And then we have the ones that we kind of just got in. I'm really interested to try these because both of these, both the Chip Quick and the SRA, are refillable pens, which I thought was nice. Now, it even takes us a while to go through one of these pens. I mean, I've had this one for like 10 years, you know, and it still has plenty of flux in it. So a pen will last you a very long time for, you know, even just like weekly, like once a week or so work, it'll last you for a long time. However, you know, it's nice for the environment and stuff if things are refillable. Oh, this one has like almost looks like it has a brush in the middle of it. That's interesting. So yeah, nicer for the environment for it to be refillable. And yeah, then you don't have to throw as much stuff away. So these are also both rosin RMA fluxes. SRA is 99-20 and the Chip Quick is CQ9LF-B-R. And then these are just two other Chip Quick ones that we've used before. They're both water soluble, so I might just show that after we do the rosin stuff. One is like medium activity and one is high activity. If I recall, I didn't like the medium activity. I thought it dissipated a little quickly, and I liked the highly active one a little bit better. And then I wrote on the edges of these because I had to, you know, look it up. This one, the M is the medium active and the H is the highly active. I hope, if I'm remembering that correctly. And so then what else do we have? We have some Chip Quick solder. So the other part about solder is that solder should contain flux, but you want pretty small diameter solder. I mean, you can probably barely even see this in the camera. You want pretty small diameter solder for surface mount stuff because you don't want to be getting huge globs everywhere. You want to be able to control the amount of solder that you're applying in a more manageable way. So thinner core solder works better, but it means it has less flux inside the solder. So that's why external flux is even more important. So we're going to try out this solder. It is 2% flux core. It is 15 mil or 0.38 millimeter diameter. And it is a, oh, that's interesting. This actually says that it's an RA core, rosin activated. It doesn't say RMA. Those do generally mean two different things, but also like rosin activated tends to be a lot pinier and stickier than the mildly activated. But I'm having trouble believing that such fine solder has a normally RA rosin activated core. Usually that's the stuff that's like really big, that's like for soldering car parts and stuff, that's really gooey and sticky, that like you get from McMaster Car if you ever made the mistake of ordering solder from McMaster Car, which you should not do. Get your solder from DigiKey. Okay, so we have that. And then this is basically the same stuff. It's just slightly bigger core. It's 20 mil diameter, 0.5 millimeters. And oh, both of these are tin. They're what I call SAC solder, SAC. You'll see that a lot on listings. So it's tin, silver, copper solder, lead-free. So yeah, we switched to all lead-free stuff a couple years ago, and I don't know, it's nice, better for the environment, and I don't know. It's like, yeah, leaded solder is like a little easier to work with, but the lead-free stuff, as long as it has silver in it, is pretty nice to work with. It's just when you have the tin copper stuff that it tends to be harder to flow and not look as nice. So then we also have solder wick. And solder wick is used for removing bridges. It's used for removing solder. It wicks up solder. And it also has flux in it. You see a theme here. Flux everywhere. Flux makes the solder flow. And the interesting thing is that most solder wick that you will see has a no clean flux in it. And so this one says on it, you know, chip quick, it is no clean wick. It is number 3. The numbers are the diameters, or the widths. So this one's 2 millimeter width. So it contains flux in it that helps wick the solder. Not all solder wicks are created equal, even the fluxed ones. Some of them just don't wick very well, and some of them do wick quite well. I have not used the chip quick yet, so I will be interested to see it. I have to say I am slightly skeptical of this wick. It looks like it has, it might have like larger diameter strands than some of the other wicks that I've used. And also, like, sometimes the color, like this is very coppery in color. Usually the ones that are nicely fluxed have like a little bit of haziness to it, and you can feel that they're a little bit sticky with flux. And I'm not feeling that on this. So we'll see. We'll see. Not judging before I use it. Just saying my observations. And then for surface mount stuff, of course, you want some smaller wick. So we'll probably work with this 1.5 millimeter diameter. This is number 2 yellow. There is number 1 as well, but I don't know. I couldn't. Maybe Chip Quick doesn't sell it, or maybe they didn't have it on their website. Ooh, this one feels a little bit more tacky to me. Like it might have more flux in it. That's interesting. And like it's not as shiny. It looks a little duller. So yeah, interesting. I mean, it's the same series, no clean wick. The other thing is that that a lot of people don't know, and that I actually didn't know until like relatively recently, the last few years, is that like the reason that you get these nice little sealed packages of solder wick is because the flux actually does kind of have a shelf life upon exposure to air. So I don't know if it oxidizes or what exactly the process is, or if it like just dissipates. But if you have solder wick and it's been stored like this with like this tab outside of the little spool for a long time, this part might not wick as well. So when you're storing your solder wick, you always want to wrap it back in the spool. And if you're having trouble wicking with your solder wick, just try to pull some more out, cut it off, try a fresh piece. All right. I think I've talked enough. Let's solder. I'm going to change to the microscope view, scooch up here, have a drink of water. So I see that there are a few watchers. Feel free to say hi in the comments and ask questions. Happy to answer them. I'll be poking my head up, and Robin will be giving me a heads up over there when there are comments. So definitely ask me anything that you want to ask about surface mount soldering. I think for the Foxy Pride, I'm going to do the back first. So let's see. What do I want to do first? I think I am going to do the chips first, and then put the capacitors and resistors around the chips. So there's a 555 timer in this one, and a decade counter that cycles through the LEDs. So I'll grab those two chips. And which one should we test out first? Let's test out. Okay, let's do our control, our legit Kester 186 rosin. And we'll do that on this guy. Just paint a little strip. What the hell's going on here? Soldering iron is all out of its holster, dangling. About to set myself on fire. All right. I'm using a Metcal soldering iron right now because I like it. Metcals are really nice soldering irons. They are a little more expensive, but you can still get pretty nice ones used. I managed to get this one at a thrift store for 35 bucks. It was like a $350 iron. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of like get this guy centered on its pads. And then, let's see. Yeah, let's just try out some of this solder. I'm gonna, try out the 15 mil first. And it's okay to mix and match fluxes like this. The solder has, solder has, that's right. Yes, solder has rosin, and so does, and the flux that we're using is rosin. But like if all you have is solder with no clean flux, it's totally fine to use it. Oh yeah. So you can see that like this is holding up to many uses there. And I can kind of, after I did that first one, I could kind of use the excess solder on the tip to solder the other leads. And I mean, if you get like really good at this kind of stuff, you can do what's called drag soldering, where you can like start with the blob and just like drag it down a row of pins. And that's kind of a fun technique. I'm not super great at that, but that's all right. So I'm going to do this. Making sure we're pretty reasonably good in the cameras. We got the, there we go. Do that. There we go. I'm just going to like put a little bit more on that one. There. And of course, that's the 555 timer, and it's an IC and it's directional. So this stripe here denotes the pin 1 end, and pin 1 will always be in the upper left-hand corner, unless it's a cursed component. The other clue is that there is a beveled edge on this side of the chip. You can see it's showing up a little bit darker in the microscope there. And that also denotes the pin 1 side. So upper, if I was looking at this like this, so in the main microscope view, that camera, it's in the upper left, and that's pin 1. And on the me see if I can get a little bit of a better view. Oh, it's actually better in the lower, in the mini micro view. You can see that there's a little dot right there in the silk screen, and that denotes pin 1. And then there's also like a little bar at the top underneath, like there is right here. And that denotes the pin 1 side. Cool. All right. So that was some nice flux. We like it. It's familiar. Good old Kester 186. All right. Questionable Kester 186. Let's see how you are. So I'm going to do one side with that. It definitely smells like a little more astringent, but that might just because it's like fresh and not 10 years old, you know. And then I'm going to put the Circuit Works one on the other side. And now this is interesting because this flux is clear, and I'm used to rosin flux being, especially RMAs, like being a little bit yellowy in color from that because it's actually like pine, derived from pine rosin. All right. So do our big decade counter chip. So on this chip, we have yet another way of denoting pin 1. We got all the ways in this without even really intending it. So this one is also very common. There's a circle in the corner right there. So there's just a dot on the actual black part of the chip body that denotes pin 1. Cool. Awesome. And so far I'm liking the solder. The solder is pretty nice. Seems to be flowing well and easily. For this one, since it's like a long chip, oh, interesting. Yeah. So that's not flowing super well, right? You saw how well the other side flowed. Now there are ways of making this flow, but we're just kind of comparing apples to apples. We want to compare apples to apples, right? So you saw that even though I had like a ball of solder on the tip on this chip, so we pre-fluxed both sides, put the chip down. I had a ball of solder on the iron. I touched it to the leg, and the flux that was there just made everything immediately flow. This is not immediately flowing. This is like being a little bit stubborn. You can do different things. You can pre-solder a pad, one pad, and then put the chip on it and then reflow it. That's also totally legit. But yeah, I do. That's the Chemtronics side, and it's definitely behaving a little differently and not as much as how I would like. So let's try the questionable Kester 186 side. Oh yeah. See how that just flowed nicely? That is what I'm hoping for, what I would expect, and what I want to see out of like a nice flux that's good for beginners. So now I'm going to add solder to this side, which will, the fresh solder plus like the little bit of flux on that side, it'll probably flow just fine because of the flux within the solder as well. So yeah. So now I'm just going to kind of go down the line here. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's okay, but I don't like it as much as I like the other one, I don't think. I wonder, you know what? That pad might actually be a ground pad too, so that would not be a fair comparison. So I'm gonna still reserve judgment on the Chemtronics solder until I'm just gonna do that a little bit. Yeah, see, that's a ground pin, and it doesn't want to flow as nicely because it's basically harder to get the heat to it's harder to heat up the pad because it's, you know, connected to that big ground pour. So all right. And this is also why having an iron that has like a decent amount of wattage is important for surface mount work. At least 60 watts, and I prefer to use irons that are around 90. although the 90-watt irons are going to be like your more expensive ones. And they generally require kind of beefier tips as well. So yeah, let's do that experiment again with the Chemtronics Flux with one of our capacitors. That. There we go. So let's do that with C4. And C4 from our little card over here is at 0.1 microfarad. Just peeling the tape off a little bit. Easier when you use tweezers to peel the tape. All right, and we're not going to do the ground side first. We're going to do the other side first, which is the left side on the unlabeled microscope view. It's interesting. It looks like the ceramic might be like slightly chipped there on that cap. It's probably fine. Probably fine. Probably just a surface blemish. All right. Let's see how this goes. All right, that flowed reasonably well. I am not unhappy with that. I take it back. I take back my original evaluation of that. I feel like that's pretty, like this is pretty reasonable flux. It's funny, I do have like a, oh, hey, Ben, how's it going? Your Hakko is only 70 watts and you have little trouble with it. Yeah, it's very iron dependent, and like Hakkos make good irons, and if everything is really, like if the tip makes really good contact with the heating element and the tips themselves are nice, then 70 watts is fine. But like I find that 90 watts are a little more versatile. I also like to have my iron hotter and spend less time on pads. So so I find that having a higher wattage iron enables me to solder that way easier rather than like dwelling on the pads and spending a lot of time on them. And that's just because I started soldering like 402s on flex circuits. So you just really couldn't dwell on pads very long, or else they'd come right off of the substrate. So yeah, I kind of tend to solder that way. Yeah, definitely. If you're ever in the area, you're welcome to try my irons. And it really does help having higher wattage when you have ground pours, for sure. Especially if you have like a ground pour, well, definitely for ones that don't have thermal reliefs where the ground pour is direct, which there are totally valid reasons for doing that. So yeah, if you don't have thermal reliefs, higher wattage iron is nicer. And also if you, I feel like if you don't have a lot of pad contact area, having a higher wattage iron is nicer. It just gets the heat in there a little quicker and easier. All right. Okay, so that was C4. I'm going to do the other 0.1 microfarad capacitor right now since they're open and I don't want to lose it. And that is C2. That one. All right. Let's try a different flux on this one. Let's try the SRA rosin flux. Now this is super fresh, so I'm going to have to pump it. I wonder if I should shake it a little bit. Shake it just a little bit. I mean, it shouldn't separate or anything. You do have to press down to kind of get it flowing. Oh, and by the way, if you have flux pens and your tips are all like junky and frayed and not working very well anymore, you can totally get replacement tips. Like they sell them everywhere. Actually, I think it was, I can't remember now if it was the SRA one or the Chip Quick one, but it came with a little extra tip in here. I don't know if you can see that on the, yeah, there we go, on the bigger microscope, on the mini micro view. But yeah, you just like, turn it upside down, pull the old one out with a pair of pliers, shove the new one in, good to go. All right, let's look at this flux. So this is the SRA 9920. And let's see, I'm going to do, again, the not grounded side first to get a good comparison. Just making sure, yes, I have the right capacitor. So I'll just do that. Yeah, that's not bad. I'm definitely going to like add more flux to that and reflow that side. Sometimes like if the flux is, good enough and on there well enough, you don't have to do that, but I'm going to do that because why? What am I seeing? I don't know. I just felt like it took a little long to flow. I mean, lead-free solder is never going to be super shiny, but I feel like it's just looking like a little duller than it has to. And like just to be sure that that's a nice joint, just add flux, reflow. Yeah, there we go. Doesn't really look much different, but that is okay. And that's what people mostly complain about with the lead-free solder, is that it looks dull. And it used to be when with the leaded solder, if it looked dull at all, you knew that it was like a bad solder joint. It was what was called a cold solder joint, which a lot of times just means like oxidized and contaminated, and would have higher resistance and be weaker, not be as strong. So so that would be a cue for you to add flux, reflow the joint. With lead-free solder, you can see here, like maybe under the microscope views, that it's not, I mean, they're not uniformly shiny. There are dull spots and shiny spots. And so kind of what I look at when I am soldering lead-free solder is, while it's molten, it should be shiny. And then when you take the heat off and it solidifies, like some of it will be a little dull and some of it will be shiny. If it goes dull while it's still molten, then I'm suspicious of that joint, and then I'll reflow it. All right, so let's see. We now have R, and sorry about that mini micro camera. I know it's like a little bit of a bummer that it's now tearing a lot. I don't know if it's the camera or the USB hub, or, I mean, this is a fancy computer. It should be able to keep up with multiple video streams. But yeah, we'll have to do a little bit more troubleshooting that. All right, so let's see. We got all of those. So we have R11 and R12, which are our resistors that are part of the circuit, 10 mega ohms and 2.2 mega ohms. And then all of the other resistors are LED resistors. So I think I'm actually going to do those those resistors next. All right, and I'm going to use the same stuff again. Where did I put it? SRA. I'll do that for both of these resistors, R11 and R12. So just using tweezers to peel back the tape around them. This is R11, 10 mega ohms. I feel like that flux is dissipating like a little quicker than I would necessarily like. Some fluxes have alcohol in them to kind of help with that, to, I guess, leave a little bit less of a residue. But I find that those fluxes just don't, they're not necessarily very active. And I'm kind of finding that to be true on this. Like the stickier fluxes are just a little better to work with. And I'm going to reflow both of these joints. basically when you start with a solder ball on the tip, you're pretty much all the flux that is on that solder ball on the tip has like dissipated by the time it gets to the circuit board. So you're really relying on the flux that you've added to the circuit board to do the to like prevent the oxidization and create the nice smooth joint. So like this might be one. Yeah, I don't know. This might be one where this flux might just not hold up to that technique quite as good. Just kind of looking at it now under the microscope to see if any of it kind of dissipates. It's not really, I'm not seeing the characteristic like alcohol dissipation that I see with a lot of no clean fluxes, where like you smear it on the board and then it like it all disappears. So yeah, we'll just add a little more, see how that goes. Thanks for joining, Ben. And yes, definitely go feed the cat. They have their schedule. They rule the house. At least mine does. Want happy kitties. All right. And I'm just kind of gently, I'm not pressing down on those components with much force. I'm just doing it enough to hold them in place while I solder them. So there we go. All right. So I think I'll do C1 now since I'm right here. We'll just do this with the SRA as well. One last one, and then we'll go on to our last flux, which is the chip quick. All right, so this is going to be a ground pad first, so it's just going to be a little harder to flow and to heat up. And yeah, you can see it's definitely like not a very good joint, which is fine. Like your first joint, you should always like start with the expectation of reflowing your first joint, because that first joint is really, you're just trying to make your component stay put. You're not really, the quality of the joint doesn't matter as much, because you can always go back and reflow it like I'm just about to do. There, that's a better joint now. It's a little bit shinier and flowed around the pad a little bit more. All right. Okay, let's see. What should we do next? Let's do C3 next. Right there. And we'll use the, oh, interesting. So, okay, hang on. Let me finish this thought first. So this is the chip quick, and it's so interesting. There is a brush inside of this. That is so fascinating. I guess it's just multi-purpose. Like I'm afraid to unscrew the end because I don't want it to like leak. But here, I'll show you in here. It's kind of neat. So there's like a whole freaking brush on this end, and so you can refill it very easily through that end. Oh, the other one, the SRA, was refillable. There are instructions for taking this end off to refill it. So it's actually the tip end. You can get it kind of in the camera there that you're refilling. But yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to get this started. Try not to get too much there. Let it kind of wick up into the tip. You can see it starting to wet out there. There we go. Just smear. All right. It is worth noting that, like, if you're doing circuits where you're working with like high frequency analog stuff and you're doing filtering or RF or whatever, flux can absolutely, it has capacitance and it can change the behavior of the circuit. So it's really, really important for some applications that all of the flux get cleaned off. And that is also why I prefer no clean for production work. Oh, that was nice. That flowed super well. I'm gonna try this. Even though it's a ground pad. Well, it still flowed reasonably well for a ground pad. Wow. Okay, yeah, I like the chip quick stuff. I feel like it smells funnier though. Let's see. No, it smells about the same. So cool. Awesome. Well, I don't know. So far, I mean, I don't know. This chip quick stuff might be my favorite. I mean, I have never had to brush flux on something because I'm not usually working on stuff that's all that big or corroded, but I could see how that would be kind of helpful maybe for some things. And like definitely having a larger opening that you can refill through is kind of neat. And it's nice flux. So yeah, that's a pretty good one. I like both of the Kester 186s. And I would say like, the Chemtronics and the SRA, they're not bad at all, but they're just, I like the other ones a little bit more. Personal preference. No, I'm not using OBS right now, Devin. It's just StreamYard with 3 cameras going into one computer. 2 are going direct USB output from the cameras into the computer. 1 is going through a cam link, so it's a HDMI to USB video capture card that's external to the computer. And I feel like I had this problem with this one the last time I used it with a different computer, so it could also just be the camera. I'll have to look into that a little bit. It's a pluggable USB like microscope camera. It's not very expensive. So yeah, I think StreamYard automatically has an anti-aliasing thing on. I'm not sure if there's a separate thing for it, but oh, interesting. So you can't use pen styles in Florida because of too much humidity. It doesn't store past about a month. I would love to learn more about that and what exactly happens, because I wouldn't have thought that humidity would be a problem for that. So I'm curious as like what happens that you're like, oh, this is bad. This is no longer, the flux is no longer working. Yeah. I mean, syringes are, oh, it evaporates. Gosh, that surprises me because I generally feel that these pens like seal reasonably well. I would have thought that like low humidity would be more of a problem with evaporation, which like here in California, even though we're close to the ocean here in San Luis Obispo, it's like desert ocean. So we typically have low humidity, except for the past month where it's been like Portland and water has been falling from the sky almost every day, which is kind of crazy for us. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, I've never worked in a place that's been very humid and had to deal with those issues. All right. Cool. So now we're on to the switch. Let's do the switch next. Sure. Before I lose it. I'm going to use my new favorite flux, Chip Quick. I like this stuff. Yeah, so we'll do the switch and then we'll be on to the resistors, at which point in time we need to figure out what colors of LEDs we're going to use, because that determines what resistor value to assemble that with. So Yeah. Have to choose colors. I have a hard time choosing colors. I kind of like them all. Devin, I also got your package and I've been so freaking busy. I haven't even opened it yet, but just the outside label was amazing. I just have to say, I was just like, whoa. I'm excited to dig into it and see it. I just wanted to actually like have some time to spend on it and not just be like, you know, ripping it open in 5 minutes and then leaving it. So anyway. Cool. Awesome. All right, resistors. Which resistors and LEDs? So we have a plethora of LEDs. All those little black rows are LEDs that we give you with the Foxy Pride board, so that you can basically make your own Pride flag on the front. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, white, cyan, and pink are what we got going on. So I think I am going to. I'm gonna go purple heavy. I think I'm gonna put all 5 purples on, and maybe I'll do purple and blue. Maybe I'll do, because there are 10 LEDs, I'll do 5 purples, 3 blues, and maybe like 2 greens. That sounds good. Why not? 5 purples, 2 blues, and greens. Okay, so purple and blue both use 470 ohm resistors, and then the green uses 1K resistors. So I'm going to figure out which 2 are green, and I'm going to do them first, and then everything else can be the 470 ohm resistors. All right. So let's see. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over here and 4 over there. So I think I'm going to do 1 green down here at D10 and maybe 1 green over here at D5. So we'll do R5 and R10 as the 1K resistors. Phew. Oh, thank you, Devin. I'm excited about it. I like playing with sequencers because I feel like I don't have to have any kind of musical ability in order to have fun with them. All right, and R10. So I'm curious, Devin, how much surface mount soldering do you do as a matter of course? Pretty often doing some SMT soldering, or just the occasional? And how did you learn? All right, so those are the 2 1Ks. So yeah, these have writing on the back of them, so I'll be able to tell once I was just thinking, should I do the LEDs now so that I don't forget which ones I designated to be the green ones. But I'm going to do them all since it's nice, and since I don't have any components on the other side right now, it's nice and flat on the table here, which is very convenient for, the video and the microscope and the focus and all of that stuff. So I'm just going to continue on with the resistors and then flip it over and do all of the LEDs at once. And since these are relatively big resistors at 1206s, they actually have the values written on them so that I can see which is in which place, so that, you know, when I forget 3 seconds of now what my plan was, I can go back to it. All right. Getting it flat is also helpful. Sometimes it's easy to accidentally sort of like have the tips of the tweezers protrude below the resistor, and so you think you're making contact with the board, but you're actually not. And sometimes if I'm not sure if it's flat, I'll just like reflow it real quick while pressing down just a little bit on it. You don't want to press too much because resistors are ceramic and you can like crack them in half. Same thing with capacitors. So gentle pressure. Another thing to point out while I'm soldering here, which is not obvious on any of the cameras, is that try to get into the habit of putting your soldering iron away dirty, meaning with solder still coating it, and then pick it up and clean it off as like the first thing that you do. I like using the brass wool cleaner because it doesn't cool your tip, it doesn't build up you know, minerals or anything on it, and like water does. And it does a nice job of just, you know, scraping it off and keeping your tip fresh. But you want to, I just dropped my resistor. Oh, there it is. I see it. You always want to leave your soldering iron coated because it just preserves the life of the tip. Less oxidation. And if you do a lot of surface mount soldering, I mean, it does help to have a little bit of dexterity with your non-dominant hand. I mean, you can see that I'm using both hands quite a bit. I always solder with my dominant hand. That's the one that I control the iron with. I think that's a reasonable idea, you know. Control the hot burny thing with the hand that you use the most. But, you know, I'm still doing relatively dexterous stuff like manipulating the tweezers with my left hand, which is my non-dominant hand. So I feel like over the years of doing this, I've actually like doing this and just like mechanical assembly work in general kind of makes you build up dexterity in both hands. Just kind of nice. Let's see. Awesome. Oh, I can turn it into a drum machine or a macro pad eventually. Ooh, this is exciting. Cool. You've only ever soldered one single SMT component. New to through-hole stuff too. Cool. Awesome. Yes, automotive wire splicing. Cool. Well, welcome to the solder side. I'm glad you picked it up. I feel like it's a skill that definitely opens up like a wealth of things that you can then do. It like makes a lot of things way less daunting, you know, like just fixing a lamp or fixing a cord or whatever. You know, if you know how to solder, then you know how to do that. And of course, if you're working on circuit boards, then you start identifying components and getting more familiar with them and start to see what good joints look like and bad joints look like. And yeah, can hopefully fix some stuff or make some stuff. I'm about to start busting out into Little Mermaid's A Whole New World here, you know? Just kidding. Maybe if I had had some beer. All right. We are done with the entire back side. So we got our resistors. Oh, actually with entire except for the battery holder. We'll do that very, very last, because that'll stick up a lot more on this side and make it really tippy. So yeah, we generally save that one for last. But yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. Oh, nice. And that's pretty nice and stable. The other tip that I do when I'm soldering under a microscope, I don't like to solder with a vise a lot, especially under the microscope, because then you have to deal with the, your board is spaced up off of the desk, and then you have to extend your microscope even more. And, that can be a little bit tricky, especially depending upon your microscope and the focal lengths and stuff. But also, I really like for surface mount components being able to move my board around a lot so that I am at the most convenient and comfortable angle soldering that component for me. And also with surface mount stuff, a lot of times, like once you start building up the board, you'll have other components that you want to work around or just sort of move the board so that they're out of your way. And so I just find that having the board flat on a surface is best for that. But if you're having trouble like with the board staying stable while you have the iron and the tweezers and everything, then a lot of times I'll just use blue tape and I'll tape the board down and, just like quickly on a side or two, solder, unstick the tape, move it around, tape it back down again. Cool. All right. If I remember, it was R10 and R5 that are my green ones. So those are going to D5 and D10. And I'm still using the Chip Quick Flux just to get some more mileage on it. Cedar Grove. Ah, yes, the dab of solder on the pad technique. I was talking about that earlier. Yeah, that is totally another way of doing it. I don't know. I mean, like there's really no right or wrong there. And you pretty much always want to reflow it no matter which way you're doing it, whether you're doing the pre-soldered pad and then moving the component onto it, or whether you're putting the component down and putting the dab of solder from the tip of your iron. You always want to reflow that if it's almost always, unless it like looks good, but because it has a higher likelihood of all the flux boiling off early. But yeah, I mean, I've done it both ways. I tend to just do the solder ball way as the first thing I do for whatever reason. I don't really even know why. But yeah, either way is totally legit. So maybe we'll do some LEDs that way. Actually, let's do the pre soldered pad technique on D10 and D5 here, and I'm gonna do it on the side that is not grounded. So I started off the stream specifically doing the solder ball as a matter of choice because I wanted to kind of test out the fluxes. I wanted to flux things first and then see how well that solder ball that was on the tip would flow. All right, D10, green. I know we give you like a lot of extra LEDs in this kit. It's kind of ridiculous. But hey, there you go. You have extra 1206 LEDs to do whatever your heart desires with. These are not wanting to get out of the package. Come on. It's a good thing that we give you extra LEDs because I'm going to shoot these across the room. Usually I have things falling out of packages when I don't want them to. So that's surprising. I wonder if oh I see what's happening. Interesting. So this was from one when we were using the sticky dots, and there are little holes in the back of the of the the LED, so the sticky dot was actually like holding the LED in a little bit. We have changed since this to using sticky tape, which is a little less sticky than the sticky dots. But I guess we still have a few kits that still have the sticky dots. There we go. All right. Hey, you don't know until you try it, and then you know. All right. So green dots are denote cathodes to the LEDs. So I always think of that as pointing towards the lower voltage, which is ground in this case. So so the green dots will go to the grounded pads. Grounded pads are easy to see because they have the thermal relief spokes, but there's also a line, as you can see right there. Yeah. Also, on the back of the LED is, yeah, you can see the little glue dot there. It should be fine. It shouldn't interfere with us soldering it at all. But you can see that there is a little arrow, and that is actually, you know, the arrow is in the direction of the arrow of the diode symbol, which points towards the cathode, towards the lower voltage side of the LED, towards the green dot. Now the glue dot might actually make it a little easier, make the LEDs stay in place. All right, so now basically as I reflow this pad, I'm gonna kind of like scooch the little LED onto it. So and it's not perfectly flat, so I'm just gonna push down a little bit, reflow it. There we go. And I'm still actually going to reflow that joint after I do the other side. Just adding a little bit of flux because I've been talking a bunch. So solder this side. I also like using these bent tips. I just feel like I have more options for like getting around components and getting the angle that I want. Oh, mini micro got bumped. Sorry about that. There we go. Cool. Can never have too many LEDs. That's what I think too. But oh, you just got a microscope, but with a fixed focus. Yeah, I have an AMScope microscope, which is really nice, and it has adjustable focus. It has adjustable magnification a little bit, and adjustable magnification, adjustable up and down. So yeah, I mean, the focal length of the microscope itself is relatively fixed, but you can move the head up and down in order to focus it with like a nice little micro adjustment without like moving the entire head up and down. And then there is basically like a zoom function that it advertises itself as like keeping the focus the same regardless of the zoom. Every microscope I've used that's like a stereo zoom microscope, you have to change the focus just a little bit when you zoom, but it's not that big of a deal. The thing that took us a while to work out was the camera. We're using a Haier, H-A-Y-E-A-R, Haier 5299 camera. And we had to get a lens because you need to get if you're trying to do a camera setup, you have to get a trinocular scope, so that has a built-in thing for a camera. But it's important that also not change focus. So as the head moves, I forget that there's a term for it that I'm forgetting right now, but I'll try to remember it and maybe put it in a comment. But there's actually also like a little bit of a focus ring on the camera itself, which is really important because I do find that even though the same thing, even though it's like supposedly fixed, you have to do like a little minute adjustment in order for that to be right. And it was also hard to get the field of view of the camera to mirror the field of view of what I was seeing, so that I wouldn't always be moving stuff out of the camera range, you know. So yeah, that took a bit of experimentation and some some sending parts back that didn't work. All right. So we already got a solder ball on that. There we go. We'll do our other green LED. Sometimes flipping things over can be hard, and sometimes you can shoot things across the room. So it's a good thing that we provide you with some extra LEDs, because I'm going to get that extra green one out right now. Okay. And I'm going to set myself up for success now and grab it in the appropriate direction. There we go. And then just kind of plop it on there and then push it down. Oop. It moved a little bit. As you can see right now, that joint is freaking terrible, but I don't care because I know I'm going to reflow it. Although I will say that that is a source of error, of human error in for anything that's like, you know, hand soldered, done by hand, is that you can forget to reflow that first joint and be left with one joint that's not so great. Okay, so this is a great opportunity to use some solder wick, because there's like a little bit too much solder on there, too much of a solder ball on there. I am going to cut off like the first inch, because this is new and I don't trust that it's necessarily been stored awesomely. And we're going to try this chip quick solder wick, see how it goes. Sometimes you need to like get it started a little bit. LEDs tend to be a little bit trickier because when you heat up the solder wick, you can, if it's overlapping the lens, you can accidentally, it's easy to melt the lenses on LEDs. But that worked pretty well. The other trick about using solder wick is sometimes you need to add a little bit of solder in order to get the wicking action started, which I know it doesn't make sense. You got to add solder to remove solder, but that's just the way it is sometimes. So sometimes it actually helps you to have like a little ball of solder on the iron. And so you have your you have the solder that you're trying to remove, you put the solder wick on top of it, you have your solder iron with a little ball on it, and then you touch the iron to the solder wick. The ball on the iron wicks into the solder, and that like causes the solder underneath it to heat up and wick. That's how all that works. Cool. All right. So now I think I need to decide which ones are going to be blue. Sure. I know, the aesthetic choices, they're the hardest and most important. So I'm going to have 3 blue LEDs, which are also somewhat glued in. Now we know. I'm going to see, I'm actually going to pull this off first because I think it will be a little bit easier, maybe, or not. There we go. There we go. The glue is making it stick to everything. Yeah, I'm glad we decided to stop using the glue dots. Okay, and one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna continue with this. Let's see. I don't want to do this. I think I want to put 2 blues over here. I'll put a blue here and a blue there and a blue here. And then all the rest will be purple. That's also, by the way, a kind of a technique that I use a lot, a little bit of a process that I use a lot. I'll only flux the components that I'm about to place. That way I have like an easy visual reference about where things are going. And it definitely helps to do one component value at a time when you do that, especially for surface mount components, especially for the smaller ones where you don't have markings or any visual indication that the component values are different. It's nice to only have one component value at a time out of your cut tape. That way it is more difficult for you to mix up components and then be wondering why your circuit doesn't work. I'm going to reflow both sides of those. Let's see. I'm still kind of lined up. We'll do that. There we go. There we go. And now the blue. Oh, that's right. I already have a solder logo on there. But yeah, I mean, you can see as I'm going through this how I'm always moving the circuit board around so that I keep a comfortable position. All right, and then the last green one was here. Awesome. Yes, using Flux on the solder wick, that can totally help. I mean, I feel like you shouldn't have to, like nice solder wick that has Flux in it, you shouldn't have to add Flux to it, but yeah, that definitely can help, especially if you have solder wick that's a little bit older where the Flux is like kind of dissipated a little bit or oxidized or done whatever it does to not work anymore. Yeah, that can definitely help. I've still had some like crappy solder wick that I think didn't have any Flux to begin with, that just even adding Flux just didn't really help it. But yeah, it is definitely a good point and something that you can do that can help. Solder wick life lesson 12B, don't hold it too close to the action. Yes. Many a times I've gotten hot fingers from holding the solder wick a little too close. And it's funny. So, yeah, like a lot of people will hold the solder wick here, right, on the nice plastic part so that your hand is insulated from the copper that is a very good heat conductor, right? that is heating up as you touch your iron to it. I always grab the actual solder wick. I don't know. I just have more control over it. I like it better that way. So I always pretty much kind of do the hot fingers thing. You can use finger cots too to help protect you from that. Yeah, I don't know. So sometimes, you know, bad habits that you started with just remain. All right. Flux the rest of these because they're all going to be purple. Purple. Which is really UV LEDs. Ooh, there we go. Those are coming out. And hopefully I won't shoot one of these across the room because I am intending on using all 5 of these buggers. And by the way, like for anybody who has any of our kits, if you do fling things across the room and end up short a component, like just, contact us through our website or, even through Mastodon messages or something like that, although website is preferable. And like, let us know, and we'll send you some extra parts. No biggie. No biggie. It's that thing where we try to give you some extra parts, but like giving you lots of extra parts on everything would, you know, then increase the cost. So try to strike a good balance there. The balance we usually have is we give you extra resistors and not extra capacitors. So yeah, here I'm back to kind of doing my most comfortable technique, which is the solder ball. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I personally am a little faster at that, so it's just what I tend to do. And I feel like I can get the component flatter to begin with without having to like reseat it. I think that's why I prefer this technique over the solder pre-tinning the pad technique. But like, again, it's like solely personal preference. There's no right or wrong. And again, making sure that all of those green dots are towards the ground pads. I feel like one of these days I'm gonna like totally get that backwards on a stream and do it all wrong. Hopefully not. It does happen though. Man, you don't pay attention. Brain farts. That's how you know when you're overheating the wick, so it won't melt the plastic housing. Yes, that is true. I have a fair number of these little plastic housings that have like little melty bits at the entrance. Yep. Gotta save that plastic, you know? All right. Got 2 more LEDs and then the battery, and then we'll be ready to fire it up. Yeah, I see a lot of times I'm like kind of in front of the in front of this camera with my fingers, but I feel like having different angles is a little bit helpful. I don't know. It would definitely be helpful if that video was not jittering as much. But oh, this one I didn't even notice that till right now. The line on the LED got a little bit blobbed into the silkscreen design on that one. But hopefully by the time you've done a bunch of them, you figure out how to identify the ground pads, and it's no big deal. But yeah, you can see the bar on this one is actually kind of blobbed into the cloud, the silk cloud.
I'm pretty sure I put all the LEDs facing the same direction too.
Oh, you didn't mess it up on purpose? Like I did on the PS I Hate You, where I put one pointing the wrong way. Valentine's Day is coming up. I'm just saying, we have the perfect little surface mount persnickety kit with things like one LED pointing the other direction, just to tell you that we love you. All right, all the LEDs are soldered. Going back to the back to solder the battery holder. This is another fun with hot components one. So we usually do this with finger cots, but the battery holders, since they are entirely one solid piece of metal, there's not really a good place to hold on to them that's insulated, right? So yeah, this one's a little bit of like a fun with Bernie fingers thing. I'm just looking for some bigger solder on this. You know, I could totally use the fine solder on that. I would just have to use a lot more of it and risk the Bernie fingers more. So I'm just going to use thicker solder and get myself all set up here. This is probably... Robin's like, oh. Okay. So that is just enough to be tacked down. Didn't burn my fingers yet. And then I shouldn't have to even risk burning my fingers really on this one. This is actually probably one where this pre-soldering the pad is a good idea. I'm just going to push down. Yeah, that's a little hot. Okay. I'm going to use tweezers. Hey, smart. Work smarter, not harder. Hey, so there we go. Don't want to necessarily squish that down too much because you can actually like bow it and make the battery a little harder to insert. But just making sure that these little battery tabs are really kind of buried in solder. Because for whatever reason, like this like tinned, that style of like tinned components, solder tends to not want to stick to it very well. And so we find that for the battery holders, it's nice to have solder like completely over the pads. And that way, when you inevitably drop this thing on the floor, the weight of the battery doesn't pop the connector off of the board. Stays put. All right. Should we put the batteries in? So this one we used 2 CR2016 batteries instead of a single CR2032. And that was because we wanted to build up a little bit of voltage because especially the purple, the UV LEDs, they 3 volts is sort of like the lowest voltage that they'll operate at. And that's what a coin cell starts at. So we just wanted a little bit higher voltage overhead for those. And so we're using 2 CR2016s in series, which are exactly the thickness of a CR2032. And we'll turn it on. Hey, look at this, it's awesome. Hee hee hee. I'm gonna put it in front of my face so it'll focus on it. There we go. Ha ha. Look at that. Super sparkly. Yay, Foxy Pride. Cool. So yeah, that's it. Surface mount soldering, evaluated some fluxes. Little recap on that. Kester 186, super legit and maybe legit. Both seemed pretty good. Chip Quick CQ9LF-B-R refillable, pretty good. Like that a lot too. And then like I would say in second place, tied for second place is the CircuitWorks CW8200 Chemtronics, and the SRA 9920 also refillable pen. And this was all RMA mildly activated. So, oh yeah, I forgot to try out the water soluble ones, but they just they're just a little more aggressive and stuff. I thought that that the Kesters and the Chip Quick were both very good. There's not like a ton of difference between those and water soluble. And the rosin is definitely more user friendly. Oh, thank you. That's diabolical for the LED for PS I Hate You. Thank you. Yeah, no problem. And I thought that the Chip Quick solder wick was pretty good. I mean, that worked pretty well too. I used on this one in the little demo solder wick 1.5, which is 1.5 millimeters width. Number 2 yellow. Also shout out to the other solder wicks that I like. My total favorite solder wick is the tech spray stuff. It just it wicks super nicely. This is also number 2 yellow, 1.5 millimeter stuff in front of the face. And then Chemtronics also makes some pretty nice solder wick. And so the Chip Quick had no clean flux in it, which seemed to work, just fine. The tech spray also has no clean and it works just fine. The Chemtronics one I like has rosin flux in it and it works really well too. it tends to like leave a little bit more residue, a little bit more stickiness on it. But so like definitely want to clean that stuff off. But all of those are really good solder wicks. And then the solder that we used was the Chip Quick RASWF.015. So it's 15 mil, 0.015 inches in diameter. And it is the tin silver copper SAC, tin 96.5%, silver 3%, copper 0.5%, 2% rosin activated flux core. And yeah, that's good. Okay. What is mildly activated and what other types are there? Aha. So there are 3 types of flux. I went over this a little bit in the beginning, but I'm happy to go over it again. So 3 types of flux. Hang on, I'm going to drink. Generally 3 categories: no clean, rosin, and water soluble. No clean tends to be the least aggressive, the crappiest flux. I really do not like using it for surface mount soldering because I find that it just does not, the working time is super quick. It doesn't flow as well. Some of it uses like an alcohol or solvent base that evaporates really quickly. So it's like even hard to coat the pads with it. And so here, as you could see, it like stuck around for like a couple of reflows and stuff. And I really like that characteristic of flux for surface mount work. But no clean, you don't have to clean it, right? It's not, in most cases, like in most cases, you don't have to clean it. The residue that it leaves behind is not generally corrosive. Rosin comes typically in 2 forms, RMA and RA, so rosin activated and rosin mildly activated. Typically, rosin activated is like really gooey and sticky, and it's the solder that I associate with like soldering car parts, where you have stuff that's like really dirty and you just need something to like cover it and coat it and really let things flow. And it tends to be like super stinky and smoky and gooey. And it's generally like not used for circuit boards. Rosin mildly activated is just like a lighter version of the rosin that like is used for circuit boards and is less, it's still like a little bit sticky and stuff, but it's much, much less so. And you can leave it on unless it's something that is going to be in a humid environment for many years. Like if you're doing production stuff, you probably want to clean it off, but like a lot of rosin flux has been left on for a very long time without it, without it bothering the circuit. Eventually it can be a little bit corrosive. So that's why no clean is a little bit more in favor these days. And it's also like no clean tends to have a clear residue. Rosin has like a sticky, yellowy residue, so it doesn't look as nice, that kind of stuff. And then water soluble, and both no clean and RMA solders, you need a solvent to clean them, like 90% isopropyl alcohol or something like that. Water soluble flux is washable with just water, just like a little bit of lukewarm water, really, and it cleans super nicely, super well. And that's used for a lot of automated soldering processes, like a lot of reflow processes. The last step is that the circuit boards get washed, and they just, they go through like water spray, high velocity water spray, essentially, and it removes all of the flux, and you're left with beautiful, clean looking circuit boards. And that is the most aggressive flux. It's the best for surface mount soldering, but the thing is you really do have to wash it because it will actually start to corrode your joints. So in the case of all fluxes and residues, the more finicky the circuit that you're working with, the more you really want to make sure you've cleaned off your flux. If you're doing high frequency stuff, RF stuff, you do generally want to make sure that you don't have any flux underneath components or around components, especially capacitors, because you can basically introduce stray capacitance to your circuit through flux. And even if you're dealing with sort of more DC level signals, but they're incredibly low voltage, there can be enough residual conductivity in the flux, especially if it mixes with some water from the air and is humid, that it, like, if you're looking at signals that are like on the millivolt level, residual flux can actually mess with your signals there as well. So low voltage stuff, high frequency stuff, you want to make really sure that you clean all the flux off. And yes, I'm speaking from experience with that. So yeah, I do like using water soluble flux. I just think for like a beginner kit, it's also, well, in a pen it's fine, but when you have solder that has a water soluble flux core, first of all, it can be hard to find, especially in lead free, but it does have a very limited shelf life because the flux will start eating the solder from the inside. So yeah, it's not as good to provide with things, I don't think. But we do use it here. We use water soluble solder paste a lot for whenever we're doing stuff with stencils and hand, reflowing and basically hand pick and placing stuff, because it's so easy to clean off. We throw the boards in the ultrasonic cleaner that just has water in it, and a few minutes in that, and they're great. They're fine. Of course, you don't want to turn the ultrasonics on with some MEMS sensors. You'll break accelerometers and stuff like that, and gyros if you wash them with an ultrasonic cleaner. Rinsing a PCB in water just sounds weird. It does, right? It's like it's really funny. Like the first time you do it, you're like, oh my God, I'm messing up my circuit board. And it's like, no,
feels wrong.
It still feels wrong. Yeah. So there are a few considerations. You want to make sure that your circuit board is not powered. So if there's anything that has like a built-in backup battery on it, like a soldered-in battery, you can't wash those. Anything that has a sensor or a component with a hole in it, like a speaker or a pressure sensor, you don't want, you want to cap them first. Cap them or not wash them with water. So yeah, there are some limitations, but otherwise, like, no, I mean, that's how most circuit boards that are in most of the things that you have undergone a washing process, and it's perfectly fine as long as you're not powered and you're not conducting. Nothing, components don't care. They don't give a shit. Like everything is pretty much fine. There is a thing with LEDs and humidity, but that is during the reflow process. So there are LEDs and some ICs too are like these moisture sensitive components, right? Where they will actually absorb water from the air. And that's why they come in the silver packs that are all sealed with the little humidity detectors inside and stuff. But what happens there is that is basically for the reflow process. So your LED will, like the lens especially, like tends to absorb water. And then if it's put through a reflow process, a typical reflow process, the temperature will heat up too fast and that water inside the LED lens can boil, and then it can cause like the connection between the anode and cathode of the LED to explode essentially. So, and the same sort of things can happen with integrated circuits as well with ICs. So that's why before the reflow process, you want to be pretty sensitive to moisture and humidity for certain components. After they're reflowed, they're totally fine. You're not going to be like typically like heating them up again in that kind of way. So yeah, totally fine to just like wash them. That's how, yeah, people get finished PCBs so clean looking. Yes. Yeah, right. Yeah, it is funny, even scrubbing them with isopropyl. Yeah, especially no clean seems to really resist cleaning. Like first, you have to have the 90% isopropyl, the 70% just won't do it. And yeah, you have to really kind of continuously be refreshing the isopropyl, because like any small bit of contamination just gets smeared around essentially. So you kind of have to really, really keep wiping it, keep cleaning it, keep the IPA flowing. Isopropyl alcohol, not beer, although beer helps. So yeah, that is definitely a thing. I tend to find that the rosin RMA actually cleans like a little bit better than a lot of the no cleans. But yep. Cool. Well, I think we're about to the end of this live stream. Thank you all so much, Cedar Grove and Devin's Workshop, for like hanging out and chatting and asking questions and yeah, soldering, actual solder content. There we go. Awesome. All right. Oh, next week we have a super awesome live stream that I'm so excited about. We have some folks from Arduino joining us, and we're soldering their new Arduino Uno Solder It Yourself kit. It's gonna be so fun. So yeah, awesome. All right. See you all next week. Bye.